Hare Krishna. So today we will discuss about the universality of the Vedic spiritual path. How it is today known as Hinduism in many social circles, but Hinduism often makes it seem to be sectarian, to be just one ism among many isms. But it has a central, universal, non-sectarian message. So when we discuss about this, we will discuss about various philosophical themes. But today what we will focus on is on the theme of Dharma. And the word Dharma is used often in ordinary discourse to refer to religion. In Hindi people say, "Aap kis dharm ke hai?" So which religion do you belong to? So Dharma is often equated Hindu Dharma, Christian Dharma, Muslim Dharma. This usage is actually only a very external meaning of the word Dharma. The word Dharma is used in the Vedas in the sense of Dhri. Dhri means that which sustains, that which is the indispensable characteristic of a living being, and that which is the means by which that thing will exist. So Dharma, to put it more concisely, the Dharma of a thing is that without which that thing will not be that thing. So just as salt will not be salt without saltiness, sugar will not be sugar without sweetness, or fire will not be fire without being hot. So Dharma of sugar is sweetness, Dharma of salt is saltishness, Dharma of fire is heat. So Dharma refers to the intrinsic, inseparable, inalienable characteristic of something. Now this may seem to be a very philosophical, abstract meaning of the word Dharma, which does not have much correlation with the way in which that word Dharma is used. So the question may come up, if a word has some meaning which is so abstract and so disconnected with the way in which the word is used today, then what significance does that meaning have? Most people don't even know this meaning of the word Dharma as referring to the universal essence. Most people use the word Dharma as referring to the religion. They equate it roughly with the word religion. So what significance does it have? If we look at the history of English, there are so many words which may have had different meanings 500 years ago, 1000 years ago, and now they have different meanings. So the old meanings of the words don't have much relevance today, except for people who are exclusively interested in the meanings of words. Those who are philologists, those who are word lovers, they may find such meaning interesting, but otherwise it's not relevant. So why should we bother about what is the meaning of the word Dharma when that meaning is not used in today's context? That is because whenever we talk about anything, there is an internal or mental concept and there is an outer or external term. So conceptions or concepts are at the level of the mind, at the level of our thoughts. They're subtle, and then we verbalize them using certain terms. So now the link between concepts and terms, that is done through consciousness. There is a conscious observer who links concepts with terms. Now if the meanings of the terms are used differently and the meanings of the terms changes, does that change the concept? No. If the original concept was one thing and the word acquires a different meaning later, then the original concept still remains the same, but the external word will not refer to that concept. Now for example, to make this a little more simpler, today the word science has a lot of respect, and a person who is a scientist or a person who knows science is considered to be intellectually respectable. And we would say that Newton, Copernicus, Galileo, these were great scientists. But actually, if you look at the history of language, the word science was not there at the time of Newton. So nowhere in Newton's writings, his own writings, or in the writings of Newton, writings about Newton by his peers, by his contemporaries, is the word science used. So at that time, the word that was used was natural philosophy. Natural philosophy. That means philosophy is the study of the reality, study of how things are at a metaphysical level, at a level of thoughts, at a deeper level beyond the appearances. So there can be different kinds of philosophy. So the philosophy which was associated with nature, that means by observing the world around us, when we try to understand a particular understand things in a philosophical way, that was called as natural philosophy. So natural philosophy later on, it is almost in the 17th, 18th century that a particular natural philosopher came up with the word science to refer to it. Now the word science might have existed earlier, but it was never used in this particular sense. So then now the systematic study of nature to understand the hows of its working and hopefully also its highs. Now this as a concept existed even before the word science existed. So that means even if Newton was never referred to himself as a scientist, he never referred to himself as a scientist, and what he did, he never referred to it as science, still the concept of science remained, although the word might not have been there. So what I am saying by this example is that now today the word philosophy does not have much respect as compared to science. Philosophy is considered something abstract, something which is for the armchair speculators. But whatever it is, though philosophy does not have much respect, and the word natural philosophy may not make much sense also to people. What is natural philosophy actually? But Newton referred to himself as a natural philosopher. So whatever a person may refer to externally, there is an inner concept. And when we understand that concept, then we can appreciate if the concept is worth appreciating, is worth understanding, worth benefiting from, then that concept has to be understood. So the word science refers to a particular way of acquiring knowledge in a systematic, observational and inferential way. So that was what Newton did, although he did not use the word for it. Now, so natural philosophy may not be very respectable in today's language, but essentially what Newton did was respectable even from today's perspective, because today the word used for it is science. So what happens is sometimes when certain words acquire certain connotations, certain words have two things, there is denotation and there is connotation. Denotation means its literal meaning, and connotation means what it implies. So words acquire certain, based on, there is, in semantics is the study of the meaning of words. So in semantics there is a whole debate about how exactly is the relationship between words and meanings. Are words like a pipeline? So for example, when I use some word and you hear that word, so is a word like a pipeline? So I, just like in a pipe I may inject water, and through the pipe the water will go and the water will fall on you. So is a word like a pipeline in which a person injects meaning and the meaning goes to the other person as it is undistorted? Or this conveys the idea of words as merely transmitters of meaning. So into words meanings are injected and then they are transmitted. This is one idea of the nature of the relationship between words and meanings. The other idea is that words are not just the transmitters of meaning, words are actually the shapers of meaning. That means when I speak a word I may have a particular meaning to it. And when you hear a word, you ascribe a slightly or an entirely different meaning to it. So, depending on the way, suppose I have heard the word gay, and I know that it refers to, say, homosexuality, and say somebody else has heard the word gay and that person has heard the word as referring only to cheerful. So when I speak that word and somebody else hears that word, they can have completely different connotations of the word. So that means, is word something which the meaning is externally put into it and it is conveyed as it is, unfiltered from one person to another, or is the meaning of the word determined by the people's minds? So now if you see, dictionaries give meanings of words, but just by studying dictionaries, can people understand conversations? Not really very well. So anyway, we don't want to go into make this a class of semantics, but the point over here is that the word dharma may have a particular narrow meaning today, but we look at its original meaning to understand how the original concept that was referred to by dharma was universal. So the original concept, which is what the word dharma originally referred to, that is universal, and understanding that concept is what is important. So the original concept dharma meant that which is an intrinsic nature of something, and this led to the idea that things have their intrinsic nature, and when things do not act according to the intrinsic nature, then that is unnatural, that is disharmonious, and that creates disorder and distress. So for example, when sugar is supposed to be sweet, but if in sugar somebody mixes chili in it, and then somebody else says, hey, what is this? What kind of sugar is this? So that is a disorder. If somebody takes salt and puts powdered sugar in it, and then an item which is made instead of salt, person tastes sugar, that will be odd. So when things are not according to their nature, that is disharmonious, that causes disorder. So now, most of the meanings of dharma which are illustrated by these, they are based on examples which are of insentient things, like say salt or sugar or fire. But the Vedic scriptures explain that everything in nature has its own nature. Everything in nature has its own nature, and that nature is something which everything should strive for. Just as water flows downwards, the wind flows from one place to another. So like that, there is an order within everything in nature, and to the extent that everything acts according to that order, to that extent life will be orderly. Now it is interesting that even modern science has discovered that everything in the universe follows laws. Right from microscopic to the macroscopic, there are laws. And even when certain aspects seem to be chaotic, like there is a theory of chaos, for example, scientists talk about, that there are certain things which behave in statistical mechanics, they behave unpredictably. But even those which behave in chaotic ways, they also may be behaving at a microscopic level chaotically, but at a larger level, their behavior can be predicted and governed by certain equations. That means there is some order over there. So everywhere there is order, and it is this order that is tapped by science through technology, and then so much power is released when that order is understood and tapped. So nuclear power, which can cause, when tapped and utilized for destructive purposes, can cause terrible destruction. So just as there is an order of things in nature, what the Vedic scriptures tell us is, there is an order of not just things, there is an order even of beings. And there is an order not only for matter, but there is an order also for consciousness. Somehow this is the idea which is missing today in modern science, that everything is governed by laws, but consciousness has no laws governing it. And that's why today the idea is, today's society is amoral. Amoral means that morality is subjective. If you think something to be right, you do it. If you think something to be wrong, don't do it. But if I think as right what you think as wrong, don't stop me from doing it. Because right and wrong are ultimately subjective. But consciousness itself also has its nature. And this nature is to be understood properly. So what do we mean by consciousness has its nature? At a very broad level, we can understand one law of consciousness, that is, what we put into consciousness ultimately comes out. Now, for example, when people are exposed to advertisements. So now when they are exposed to the same advertisement again and again and again, and the advertisements are made using sophisticated technology and sophisticated understanding of the psychological mechanisms that generate desires within people's minds, then people, by repeated exposure to the advertisement, think that, oh, I want to purchase this, I want to get this. So here what is happening? That in psychology, or as understood in some way through psychology, that there are certain laws. So consciousness, when exposed to certain things, responds in certain ways. So this is not a matter of sectarian belief or a subjective conception. Whether it is a person who is a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, whether a person is a African American or a Russian or a Chinese, whether a person is educated or uneducated, if a person is repeatedly exposed to certain tempting advertisements, then that person will have those corresponding desires generated within, and that person will act accordingly. So this is a universal principle. So just as there are laws which govern gross matter, which are uncovered through physics, so similarly there are laws that govern consciousness. And dharma is about that consciousness and its nature and its interaction. So essentially dharma refers to things which are according to their nature, which stay in harmony with what they are meant to be. So the original meaning of the word dharma in that sense is the intrinsic nature of something. So what is our intrinsic nature? Now, the intrinsic nature of everyone is to love and to serve. We all want to love and to be loved. And to the extent we love or we are loved, we express that through service. We all express our love through service. This is the mother when she loves her child. What does she do? She serves. She offers her breast milk when the baby starts crying. He caresses her, fondles her, and then comforts her, and that way serves her. So wherever there is love, it is expressed through service. And again, love and service are characteristics which are universal. They do not depend on the sectarian designations, again, nationality or religion or any such designations. In fact, what to speak of depending on any human created designations, these do not depend even on consciousness being manifested in the human form. Even when the consciousness is manifested in lower species. A tiger cares for its cubs. Elephant cares for its babies. A cat cares for its kittens. And that caring is expressed through love and through service. So now, depending on circumstances, the love and care may be expressed in different ways to some extent. But that love and care is there. Whereas people, when they want to meet and they have a greeting, in some cultures, some people may embrace each other, some people may kiss each other, some people may just do high fives, they just flash their hands against each other. Now, in some cultures, people rub their noses against each other. They consider that a particular form of greeting. So now the way that greeting may be expressed may be different. But essentially what is done? It's an expression of greeting. So there will be cultural variations in the expression of the underlying principle. But the underlying principle is universal. It is universal across human cultures, and it is universal beyond human species also, to the lower species. So to love and serve is our dharma. And this is universal. Everyone has a tendency to love and serve. So what the Vedas, when scripture says that this is our nature, this nature cannot be taken away. If there is no loving and serving, then there is practically no consciousness only. And that person is devoid of, any being that is devoid of consciousness is no longer a being, it becomes a thing. Now here when we understand the word dharma, if this was the original meaning, then how has this idea come about that today people say Hindu dharma, Christian dharma, Muslim dharma? How has this idea of equating dharma with certain religious systems come about? Actually, the dharma is not just an abstract concept. We have to understand that the word dharma has multiple meanings. So at its foundation it means our original nature. But this original nature, to love and serve, this is in the Vedic and philosophical understanding connected with another aspect of our nature, that is Sanatan. All of us want to live forever. No one wants to die. And this is something which again by science I mean reductionistic, materialistic science, has great difficulty in explaining that if everywhere around me I see everything is perishable, everything is destroyed, nothing is going to stay forever, then when everything around me is getting destroyed, why do I get even the desire to live forever? If a child has never seen gold, then will the child get a desire for gold? No. If there was something which we had never had any experience of, then we would not even get a desire for that. Our desires come from certain things. Our desires may be extrapolated, may be distorted, may be exaggerated based on whatever we have seen, but there has to be some connection with what we have seen. So just as a child who has never seen gold cannot desire gold, similarly, when there is nothing which is lasting, there is nothing that is eternal around us, when everything is perishable, where does our desire for to exist forever come from? And this desire is not just in us human beings, it is there again in all species. Even that mosquito, it has ingenious ways to try to escape when somebody tries to kill it. If I try to hit it, the mosquito has sensors by which you can feel the hand coming and it flies off before I can hit it. So all species have this tendency to live, to prolong their life and as much as possible, and if it were possible, to live forever. So where does this come from? Again, materialistic science does not have the answer. And what the scriptures tell us is that this comes from who we are. We are souls. And the soul by nature is Sat Chitananda. The soul is eternal. So now we have talked about two distinct attributes of the soul. One is the soul's or the propensity to love and serve, and the other is for eternal existence. So now the marriage of these two is called as Sanata Dharma. So Dharma is the inclination to love and serve. Sanatan is eternal existence. Sanatan Dharma is that which brings these two together. Our inclination for eternal existence, our longing, not just inclination, it's an intrinsic longing for eternal existence and our intrinsic longing for love and service. So currently, our propensity for love and service is there with us. It is inalienable. It cannot be removed from us. It is there even when a person is atheistic. Even an atheistic person has some inclination to love and serve someone. Even atheists create their leaders. They make their own leaders of atheists into icons, into people who are very respected, and then they love and serve them. So that tendency is there, but this tendency for love and service is presently directed towards temporary things. It is directed towards Sanatana things, towards things which are not eternal. And when our love and service is directed towards non-eternal things, it ends in misery. It leads to dissatisfaction. Why? Because we love and serve something and then that thing is taken away from us. And when it's taken away, there is great misery that results by the separation from that object. So, how can we direct our loving and serving propensity towards an eternal object? That is the genius of Sanatana Dharma. The Sanatana Dharma teaches us, guides us, how we can direct our loving and serving propensity towards the eternal Supreme Being, who is God. Now God may be known by different names in different traditions, but He is understood in all traditions which have a basic understanding of God, that He is understood to be eternal and He is understood to be our Master, our Lord. So by loving and serving Him, we can attain eternal fulfillment for our propensity, for our longing to love and serve. So Sanatana Dharma then refers to what? Firstly, it refers to our eternal nature to love and serve God. So the Vedic scriptures explain that as souls, we have an eternal nature to love and serve God. But currently it is misdirected. So now it is misdirected. We are loving and serving things which are asanatana. So then what is to be done? We need a process by which we can redirect our loving propensity towards God. And that process is also called as dharma. So now this way we have come to three meanings of the word dharma. First is, dharma refers to that which is our nature, which is to love and serve. Then secondly, when we understand it from eternal perspective, dharma in its complete sense means to love and serve God. Then in a third sense, so right now I have a tendency to love and serve, but my love and serving tendency is directed towards worldly things. So those set of activities by which we can redirect our loving and serving propensity from this world, from the temporary things to the eternal, that is also called as dharma. That means there is dharma at one level. At our present level, our dharma is to love and serve. At our perfected level, our dharma will be, or dharma naturally is, to love and serve God. Now, at a transformational level, dharma is that which will direct our loving and serving nature from the worldly things to God. So, when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, when he says that he comes to re-establish dharma, he talks about this in 4.7 and 8 in the Bhagavad Gita, that he comes when the dharma declines, he comes to re-establish dharma. Now he is not referring to the first level or third level meaning, because loving and serving is our intrinsic nature, and that is going to be our nature eternally. And at the level of Sanatana Dharma, there is no change. Once we are directed our love towards God, that will also be eternal. But when Krishna says, I come to establish dharma, he refers to the arrangements by which our loving and serving propensity can be directed from matter to spirit. So now this arrangement is not just individual, but it is a social arrangement. What does this mean? That the Vedic scriptures do not envision spirituality as merely an individual pursuit. Yes, ultimately every soul has to individually direct one's heart from worldly things towards God. That is true. But it is not that every soul has to do this individually and society will just be managed without any consideration for this. Now the idea is that all souls should help each other in doing this. And then if they, then the whole society is arranged in such a way then that all of them are moving towards directing their love towards God, then that is a perfect society. That is a society which will grow spiritually in a harmonious way. This brings us to two levels of dharma. So now within this dharma, so now dharma we are referring to not as the intrinsic nature. That intrinsic nature is there, but that intrinsic nature right now is not manifested fully because we are directing our love towards temporary things. So we now want to direct our love towards eternal things. So when we have to direct our love towards eternal things, we need a transformational process. And this transformational process should not just be individual in terms of helping one individual to transform, but it should also be social in terms of enabling everyone to direct themselves towards God. So that brings us to the multiple meanings of the word dharma. The two levels right now we discuss. There is paradharma and there is aparadharma. Paradharma refers to transcendental religion. That means it refers to those activities which directly help us to revive our love for God. So these are devotional activities. For example, hearing about God, speaking about God, worshipping God, chanting His names. Now, if we look at what is called as the activities of Bhakti, then we will see that here Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. If we just put aside the name Vishnu over here, the activities are universal. Hearing, speaking, remembering, worshipping, serving, these are universal activities. And if we look at the various religious traditions of the world, they all have these activities. Jesus spoke and His disciples heard. God, Allah spoke through Gabriel and Muhammad heard. And then Muhammad spoke and his followers heard. Buddha spoke and his followers heard. So this hearing, speaking, hearing, remembering, and then acting accordingly, these are universal activities irrespective of whichever specific religious tradition one belongs to. So there is paradharma refers to those activities that enable one to transform one's love from matter to spirit directly by focusing on God. But it is understood also in the Vedic culture that one cannot just entirely, immediately transform one's love from matter to God. Because one has to live in this world, and living in this world also requires order, it requires harmony. And for that there is aparadharma. Aparadharma is, para is transcendental, apara is non-transcendental. So this para and apara, this distinction is talked about, especially it's talked about in the Munda Upanishad. It's hinted at in the Upanishad in general, but Munda Upanishad talks about it. It talks about paravidya and aparavidya. So apara refers to non-transcendental. It refers to, in one sense, material. So society has to be arranged materially also in such a way that the spiritual progress of the individuals can be facilitated. So that arrangement is also called as dharma. So for example, a king ruling righteously, that helps people to practice devotional activities. Now, if there is no king, or if the king is an exploiter and people are living in great anxiety and people are living in uncertainty about whether they will even survive, they will get their necessities for survival, then they cannot very properly practice spiritual life. So arranging society in such a way that the means of transformation can be effected, or redirection of one's love from matter to spirit can be effected, that is also called as dharma. So now we discussed about two levels of dharma, para and apara dharma. Now in apara dharma, again there is classification. So because the word dharma, because different people at the material level have different natures. Now remember, we are talking about the nature of things is called as dharma. So at the level of soul, all souls have the same nature to love and serve. But we are not just souls. Right now we are embodied souls. And when we are embodied souls, the embodiment, the body and the soul that body and mind that cover the soul, cause that soul's nature to be expressed in a particular way. So therefore, each of us has different natures. And these natures are classified into four. So what is called as the caste system today is actually not a caste system, it is actually a system of taxonomy for classification of human beings. So these four are essentially human types. In every society, we'll see certain people who are intellectuals, certain people who are administrators, certain people who are business professionals, and certain people who are general assistants, who do other kinds of work. So these are broad divisions which are there everywhere. So what has this got to do with dharma now? Now dharma of the soul is to love and serve Krishna, to love and serve God in general. So this is against universal. But when the soul is covered by a particular body and mind, that soul's loving and serving nature will be expressed in a different way. So in the way that love and soul's loving and serving nature is expressed, that is also that becomes the soul's, that determines the soul's aparadharma. So although the paradharma of all souls is the same, the paradharma of all souls is to love and serve Krishna, the aparadharma of all souls will not be the same. The aparadharma will be determined by the nature of the conditioning. There are broad classifications. There is Brahmana Dharma, there is Kshatriya Dharma, there is Vaishya Dharma, there is Shudra Dharma. And again, these are dependent on nature. So it's not meant to discriminate against people. It's actually meant to facilitate people to act according to their nature. This is also called as Varna Ashram Dharma. So now we'll look at this meaning of the word Bhagavad Gita. This meaning of the word in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna says in 3.35, Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharmat Swanushtita Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyo Paradharmo Bhayavaha. Here Krishna is saying, it is far better to do one's own dharma than to do anyone else's dharma. In fact, he says that destruction in one's own, while doing one's own dharma, is far better than trying to do somebody else's dharma, because that is bhayavaha, that is dangerous. Now this clearly is not referring, this word, usage of the word dharma, clearly doesn't refer to the inherent nature of all living beings. Because if it were referring to that, then there would be no question of swadharma and paradharma, because everybody's dharma would be the same. So here it is referring to something else. And what is it referring to? It is referring to one's nature at the level of the body and the mind. So a Brahmana should act as a Brahmana and not act as a Kshatriya. And a Kshatriya should act as a Kshatriya and not act as a Brahmana. Why is this required? Because in society order has to be maintained. And maintaining of order in society means that people act not in artificially imposed or restricted ways, but in the ways which are according to their nature. So this is a very significant aspect of Vedic culture, that in all religions it is talked about how we should direct ourselves towards the spiritual, towards the transcendental, towards the eternal, towards God, or some equivalent conception of eternity. So, but that is talked about. But the way in which this can be brought about socially, or a social arrangement to facilitate this, has not been talked about anywhere else. So in Christianity, in Islam, there are law codes which are there, but there is nowhere any comprehensive social arrangement for helping people to act, to direct their love from matter towards God. So now paradharma and aparadharma ideally should go harmoniously. That means that, say, the parents are devoted spiritualists, and the parents train their children to also become devoted spiritualists. So the paradharma is to love God, and the aparadharma is, in a society there should be balance. Children should obey their parents. So for the children to obey their parents is also dharma. For the parents to be responsible and take care of the children, that is also dharma. This is aparadharma. So the aparadharma and the paradharma, when they both go together, that is the best. And that is what Vedic society was originally meant to be. Now, there are certain times when these may be in conflict. At that time, appropriate adjustments have to be made so that both can still be, social order is also maintained, and the spiritual interest is also pursued. But if there are irreconcilable differences between the two, then the dharma for practicing spiritual life has to be emphasized, because that is our eternal dharma. Now, among these two, the aparadharma and the paradharma, the aparadharma is not eternal, and the aparadharma is also not essential. There is some form of social arrangement that is required, but a soul who has never been a part of Varnashram can still learn to love God and return back to God. To help this, to facilitate this happening at a social level, aparadharma is required. So many people, because in the Vedic culture, the caste system, the Varnashram that was there, it degenerated into a caste system, and the caste system was restrictive, the caste system was in some ways discriminatory. So because of that, people reject the whole gamut of Vedic wisdom, and they feel this whole thing is discriminatory, we don't want it. But that is, first of all, aparadharma is not the essential message of the Vedic scriptures. What to speak of a distortion of aparadharma, which is today's caste system. So, the essential message of the Vedic scriptures is the teaching of paradharma, and this is the universal teaching of all the religions of the world. And in that sense, actually, the essential message of the Vedic scriptures is non-sectarian. It underlies and unifies all the world's great theistic religions. It is essentially a process by which one can direct oneself from matter towards God. So by equating the profound word dharma with religion, what happens is, not only is the universality of it lost, but along with that, the empowerment, the transformation, and the elevation of human consciousness that is possible by understanding the concept of dharma and trying to imbibe it in one's life, that also becomes lost. So that's why when the great Vedic teachers talk about dharma, they distance it from the sectarian religions that are there. Now the dharma is today having the facility to be practiced in any situation. So there may be people who may be of different religions, but still they can also practice spiritual life. They can also learn to love God, and they can return back to God. That's why Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, he said that I have not come here to convert people from Christians to Hindus or Muslims to Hindus. So there is a conversion that is horizontal. This will be the concluding point we'll discuss. There is a horizontal conversion and there is a vertical conversion. Horizontal conversion refers to changing people's designations. Now somebody is a Hindu, you change that person to a Christian, or somebody is a Christian, change that person to a Muslim. Now this sort of horizontal conversion, now the very concept of Hindu, Muslim, Christian, this has got nothing to do with the soul. The soul is not Hindu, Muslim, Christian. It is a designation that is there for the body, and that designation is changeable, and changing that designation does not change the soul's propensities, soul's nature. That changing that designation does not automatically enable the soul to love God. So horizontal conversion may change the demographics in the nature of population, the composition of population, but it does not change the person's consciousness much. It is vertical conversion. Vertical conversion means the practice of paradharma, by which the soul changes from being a lover of the world to a lover of God, from being materialistic to being spiritual. It is that conversion that is vital. It is that conversion which is universal, that is which is desirable. Now horizontal conversion is useful to the extent that it inspires a person towards vertical conversion. That means if a person feels inspired, and okay, I feel inspired by the sacrifice of Jesus, and by meditating on Jesus' sacrifice, I'll feel inspired to devote myself to God. Then if that person changes from one religion to another, that is of some use. So it's to give another example to understand this. Vertical conversion means like climbing up a mountain. So now to climb up a mountain, there may be different pathways up the mountain. So now some person may feel, okay, this path is very difficult for me. So some people may find that a path with steps is easier. Some people may feel like, okay, path where I can just hold on to branches and twigs, I will go that way. Some people may say, oh, I want a clear road, whatever it is. So there may be different ways to climb up the mountain. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Chaitanya Shikshamrut says that different spiritual seers, whether they be Plato or Pythagoras, whether it be Vyasa or it may be some other, they have all seen that one peak of the absolute truth from different directions. And they have pointed out ways to progress towards that absolute truth. So now, if somebody is at the bottom of the mountain and the only thing that the person busies oneself with is going round and round at the bottom of the mountain and pull people from the other paths and get them to one's own path, and the person doesn't climb up the mountain oneself, then that is not of much use. What is important is one climbs up the mountain. And people who are at the bottom of the mountain, if they truly see, oh, this person has climbed so much up, so that means this path is good, I can climb up also. So if people see that those who are devoted to spirituality, they are transformed. What is the transformation? When there is love for God, then there is love for all living beings, because one understands God's connection with all living beings. So when there is love for all living beings, there is humility, there is tolerance. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the characteristics of advanced spiritualists are talked about in universal terms. Tikshava, Karunika, Surda, Sarvadehina, Ajata Shatrava Shanta, Sadhava Sadhabhushana. So they are not talked about in sectarian terms. That this person, does this particular ritual, or this person does that or that or that. It talks about one who has tolerance, one who has humility, one who has self-control, one who has compassion. So these are universal qualities, and these qualities develop to the extent one develops love for God and one revives one's original spiritual nature. So the word dharma actually is very different from the word religion. So what we call as religion today are external manifestations of dharma. That means they are non-essential external manifestations. They could be means for rising up the mountain, but they could well also be means for staying stuck at the bottom of the mountain. There is a group of people who call themselves as Hindu atheists. It is an oxymoron. Oxymoron is a self-contradictory term. Hinduism is based on understanding, acceptance of the Vedic scriptures, and therein is acceptance of God. Similarly, there are people who say that we are Jew atheists. This is all ridiculous, because it's like, then in this case what has happened is religion has just become another designation to perpetuate one's ignorance. So that which is called as religion, that which in today's terminology people may call as dharma, dharma has become a means by which people stay in a dharma. So if the activities that are called as dharma do not lead people towards higher consciousness, then they are not dharma, they are adharma. So only those activities which enable people to rise to a higher level of consciousness, they alone are dharma. And it is that dharma which is the essential message of the Vedic scriptures. That which is our essential nature, and that which is the process by which that essential nature can be revived and our eternal life can be achieved. That is the universal legacy. And this legacy is not based on belief in certain sectarian conceptions of God, or certain sectarian conceptions of what is a revealed truth, certain sectarian conceptions of some chosen people. No, it is based on understanding of the universal principles of what our nature is and how we can live according to that nature. So we'll continue further exploration of the universal concepts or within the Vedic tradition in our next class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.